Welcome back to GH Updates, your go-to spot for all the drama, revelations, and explosive secrets from General Hospital. Buckle up, because the episode airing on Monday, June 2nd, 2025, is nothing short of a seismic shakeup in Port Charles. Let's break it all down. General Hospital will reveal Sasha, already overwhelmed by the excruciating pain of labor, found herself trapped in a moment that would change her life forever. The contractions were fierce, and her body was begging for relief. But turmoil in her mind was far worse, just when she thought she could finally begin to focus on the birth of her child. The weight of the ongoing trial pressed down on her, making every second bearable. Rick Lansing, relentless in his questioning, took no mercy on her. His questions about her past with Michael felt like daggers to her already fragile state. He didn't just want the facts. He was digging for a specific detail. When exactly had she been with Michael last? The question, however invasive, had real stakes. It could determine Michael's right to claim fatherhood over the child she was about to bring into Thward. Sasha's body twisted in agony, but it was the interrogation that made her want to break down completely. She had never anticipated that her personal life would be dissected so publicly. And now, under the bright lights of the courtroom, she had no choice but to endure. The fact that Rick would go so far as to want the intimacy between her and Michael felt like a betrayal. But the pain of labor was only exacerbated by the rising tension surrounding the case, and Sasha could hardly focus on anything other than the growing discomfort in her abdomen. Just as she felt like she might crumble under pressure, Rick dropped a bombshell. Michael was indeed the father of Heron-born child. This revelation, which Nina had stumbled upon at Brown Dog Bar, rocked Sasha to her core, and she wondered how much more she could take. But no one had foreseen the immediate consequences of this revelation. No one expected Sasha's water to break right there in the courtroom, thrusting her into an even greater crisis. In the chaos that followed, as Sasha struggled with contractions that felt too much to bear, Willow, despite her own internal conflict, stepped up. As a trained nurse, she had been through many emergencies, but this was different. There was a deeply personal connection between her and Sasha, a bond of anger and betrayal that simmered beneath the surface. Willow had her own to face. She knew the situation was complicated. After all, she had betrayed Michael too. Her affair with Drew weighed heavily on her conscience, but as she looked at Sasha, she couldn't walk away. Her professional instinct and she knew what she had to do, even if it meant putting her own feelings aside. Time was running out, and the emergency responders were nowhere near the scene. Without hesitation, Willow pushed her own emotions aside, locking them away in the darkest corner of her mind. She positioned herself near Sasha, her hands steady, despite the inner storm raging within her. As Sasha screamed in pain, Willow remained calm, guiding her through the most critical moment of her life. She could feel Sasha's desperation, the exhaustion that was taking over her body. Willow could only focus on the task at hand, delivering the baby, saving both mother and child. But deep inside, Willow couldn't shake the tumult of emotions she was battling. Willow had watched Michael deceive Sasha, breaking her heart. But what had she done? She had slept with Drew, betrayed Michael, and Kassad. And now, as much as she tried to push the guilt away, it remained like an unshakable shadow. But there was no time for self-reflection. Now there was only Sasha and the baby, and Willow was the one who needed to help them both survive this crisis. As labor intensified, Sasha's body fought against her. She was weak, exhausted, and in the rat, and in the darkest pain she had ever known. But she couldn't surrender to it. Not now. Willow, however, was in control. She had neither choice. With the birth so close and no doctors in sight, she had to baby one to bring this baby into the world. And that's exactly what she did, delivering the child in a tense, silent urgency, knowing full well that nothing would ever be the same again for either of them. Willow wasn't prepared for what came next. The reality of the situation settled heavily on her, with Sasha too-tiered to notice anything. Willow made a decision that would haunt her. As Sasha slept, vulnerable and unaware, Willow swapped the newborn with another baby from a nearby hospital room. A child that had no connection to Sasha, no connection to Michael. It was a calculated call to action. Willow couldn't help herself, overwhelmed by the betrayal and anger that boiled inside her. Michael and Sasha, oblivious to the switch, would never know the truth of what had happened that day. But Willow knew, and that knowledge would never leave her. Michael, meanwhile, would continue to raise the child as his own, never suspecting the truth about what had transpired in the delivery room. Sasha, too, would go on believing that her baby was alive and well, blissful unaware of the betrayal that had unfolded in the shadows. As the months went on, Willow would watch from the lines, her guilt gnawing at her every time she saw Michael with his new child, unaware that everything he believed was a lie. The weight of her actions would follow her, haunting her in ways she couldn't escape, and as Sasha and Michael's relationship more strained, Willow couldn't help but wonder if the truth would ever come to light, or if it would remain buried, like the secret she kept so carefully hidden. In the end, Willow's decision would haunt her just as much as the lease off others had haunted her. She had saved Sasha that day, but she had destroyed something far more precious in the process. Would anyone ever forgive her for what she'd done? And, more importantly, could she forgive herself?
After Sasha gave birth,
her body was utterly drained, overwhelmed by an intense physical toll of labor. She had endured unimaginable pain, but it was far from over. As the effects of Houston set in, Sasha drifted into a haze of unconsciousness, her mind too foggy to process anything around her. She was unaware of the profound betrayal that had just unfolded within the thestral walls of the hospital room. In her weakened state, Sasha couldn't defend herself from the devious actions about to take place. Willow, standing in the corner of the room, watched Sasha closely as she slept. Her mind was racing, torn between the heavy burden of guilt and the cold, unrelenting determination that had taken over her heart. Willow's hands shook with a mixture of fear and rage as she realized the enormity of what she was about to do. But despite everything, she felt a sharp sense of justice. However warped it was, the anger she had been harboring for so long, the fury over Michael's betrayal fueled her every move. As Sasha remained unconscious, Willow acted quickly, her heart hammered in her chest as she crossed the room to where Sasha's newborn child lay in the bassinet. The baby, still fragile and small, was so innocent, so vulnerable, completely unaware of the twisted game being played. Willow's eyes scanned the room, making sure no one was watching. The hospital room was quiet, the machines beeping softly in the background. But in that moment, it felt like the whole world had gone silent. No one would ever know what she was about to do. She reached into the basin with a steady hand, lifting the infant carefully as she glanced over at the other crib in the corner of the room. Another baby, a stranger's child, was quietly resting. It had been placid there moments before, left alone, and forgotten by the bustling hospital staff. Willow's pulse quickened as she transferred the child, substituting Sasha's newborn with this one, and silently swore to herself that the secret would never be uncovered. The baby she handed to Sasha wasn't her son. It wasn't Michael's child. The child Sasha would raise, believe in, and love. Yes, her own would not carry Michael's blood. No one would ever know. Only Willow held the key to this horrifying secret, a secret that would tear apart lives, twist emotions, and bury the truths forever. Willow knew this decision would haunt her, but in that moment, it felt like the only thing she could do to pay back the betrayal she had endured. Michael's lies. His deception had driven her to this. But it wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about power. Power over Sasha, over Michael, and over the very narrative of their lives. If she could manipulate the situation, control the outcome, she would force them both to live with the consequences of their actions. In a way, this would be her final revenge. Her twisted way of making sure they could never go back to what they had. Sasha would wake up disoriented, unaware that the child she held in her arms was not her own. The shock would come later, when the bond that should have been formed with Herson would never take place. When that truth was finally revealed and of everything she had believed in would shatter. But for now, Sasha remains blissfully unaware. Cradling the child's thought was hers, believing in a leaf that Willow had meticulously lifted. Michael, too, would never suspect that the child he had been eagerly waiting for wasn't the one he was about to raise. He would smile with pride, thinking the child he held waste product of his love for Sasha. But Willow knew better. She knew the truth, and that truth was a heavy burden she would carry alone for as long as she could. The guilt gnawed at her, but the anger, the deep seething anger that had driven her to this point, was still too strong. In the days that followed, Sasha and Michael would build their lives around the child they believed was theirs. The baby would grow up in a home filled with love, but the shadow of deceit would always hang over them. Willow would watch from the sidelines, knowing that she had woven the web that would entrap them, but also knowing that there was no turning back. What she had done was so irreversible. The child that Michael and Sasha thought was their son would live a life full of secrets, lies, and unspoken truths. And as for Willow, she would bear the weight of her decision in silence, never once allowing herself to forget the price of the secret she had stolen, the future she had altered with her own hands. The day she had traded a child for Ranathor would be the day that changed everything. But she would carry on as if nothing had ever happened, hiding behind the mask of a nurse, a friend, and a woman who had lost her own sense of self, the pursuit of revenge. Michael and Sasha would never know the truth. They would continue to live in a carefully constructed illusion that the child in their arms was theirs. Their lives, once filled with dreams and hope, would now be marred by a hidden betrayal, one that would change everything forever. The quiet moments of joy they shared in their new life would built on the fractured foundation of lies. And the cracks, though invisible to them, would only widen with time. That child they believed was theirs, a product of their love, would grow up surrounded by affection and care. Yet beneath the surface, a silent, deep-wound would simmer. Sasha, blinded by the euphoria of motherhood, would never suspect that baby she held close. The child Shahad hoped for was not her own. She would cradle the child lovingly, her heart bound to the infant, convinced it was the gift she and Michael had longed for. Her maternal instincts, pure and unwavering, would guide her every step, but they would be tethered to a truth she could never grasp. For Michael, the pain would be different. Though equally devastating, he would hold his child in his arms, high sighs filled with pride and joy, believing that everything he had fought for, every sacrifice he had made, had led to this moment. But as time passed, the whispers of doubt, subtle at first, would begin to creep into his mind. Something would feel off. Maybe that child's mannerisms didn't quite match his own, or perhaps the bond that he had expected to form with the baby wasn't as strong as it should have been. These feelings, though fleeting at first, would grow into an overwhelming certainty that something wasn't right. The day Michael would finally learn the truth would come. And it would come like a storm, crashing into his life with a force he was unprepared for. When Thiskrit was eventually uncovered, their revelation would hit him like a physical blow. He would feel as though the ground beneath him had disappeared, leaving Jim in free fall. The truth would be too much to bear. He was not the father of the child he had come to love as his own. The bond he had forged, the dreams he had for their future as a family would be shattered in an instant. The betrayal he would feel would be consuming. He would question everything from his relationship with Sasha to his trust in those closest to him. He would feel deceived not only by Willow, who had once been his confidant, but by Sasha as well. Sasha, the woman he had believed in, the woman he had thought would always stand by him, had hidden the truth from him, the weight of her silence. The fact Thatch had known all along but had allowed him to live a lie would tear him apart. He would wonder how he could have been so blind, how he had allowed himself to fall into such a well-crafted illusion. The emotional pain would be compounded by feelings of betrayal and anger, Michael's trust in people, already fragile from years of dealing with his family's secrets, would be irrevocably broken. He would feel as though the very foundation of his life had been built only. The anguish of not only being deceived, but also of having been Theon to unknowingly love a child who was not his own, would torment him. The realization that Sasha had kept this from him, that she had allowed him to believe something so fundamentally, would create a chasm between them that might never be bridged. For Sasha, the revelation would be as the truth came to light, the bond she had felt with the child, the one she had raised as her own, would be replaced by confusion and grief. The child she had nurtured, the baby she had cared for with all the love of a mother, would suddenly become a reminder of a betrayal she couldn't comprehend. She would feel torn between her deep, undying love for the child and the crushing truth that it was not hers. The emotional turmoil would be unbearable. She had lived in a world of her own, one where the child she loved was hers. But now she would have to face the painful reality that she had been complicit. In a web of lies, the pain of this discovery would forever change the trajectory of their relationship. Michael and Sasha, despite their shared love and the foundation they had built together, would find themselves unable to trust each other again. The sense of betrayal would be too great to overcome. Their relationship would begin to erode piece by piece as each of them struggled to come to terms with the emotional devastation wrought by their deception. What began as a bond between two people illuminated by love and the anticipation of a future with their child would unravel under the weight of truth. No amount of apology, no heartfelt pleas for forgiveness would ever fully heal through ends caused by such a profound betrayal. Their lives, now tainted by the knowledge that they had been living in alley, would be forever marked by the knowledge that trust once broken could never be fully restored. The baby, once a symbol of hope and renewal, would become the silent trinder of the consequences of their actions, an innocent victim in a story of betrayal that no one had ever intended. Michael and Sasha, despite all love they had for their child, would never be able to erase the truth, and in the end, they would both be left to grapple with the haunting question: how could they ever truly move forward from a betrayal that had changed everything? Willow stood in the silence of her own mind, trapped in the weight of her actions. Every step she took, every moment she breathed, was overshadowed by knowledge of what she had done. She had betrayed Michael, the man she hadn't loved, the man she had promised to be faithful to. She had let herself become consumed by her anger and her sense of betrayal. And in doing so, she had broken not just his heart, but her own as well. The truth of her actions was a constant trace, a shadow that followed her everywhere she went. Even when she tried to push it away, to bury it deep within her, it always came back, relentless like gnawing at her. She had hurt the person she cared about most, and that truth was something she couldn't escape. But the most unbearable part was that no one, not even Michael, would ever know what she had done. The weight of the secret she carried was suffocating, and the guilt wrapped around her like chains, tightening with each passing day. In the quiet moments, Wench was alone with her thoughts. The overwhelming sense of remorse would rise up, threatening to consume her completely. She would replay everything on her mind: how she had made the choicito deceive Michael, how she had let her emotions cloud her judgment, and how in the end she had destroyed something pure. She had justified her actions to herself at the time, convincing herself that it was all for the right reasons, that it was somehow justified. But deep down, she knew the truth. There was no justification for the pain she had caused, for the lives had destroyed in the process. She had stolen the truth from Michael, and by doing so, she had robbed herself of any chance at redemption. The guilt of her deceit weighed so heavily on her heart that it felt as though it would crush her under its burden. But the most haunting part of all was that she had no way to make things right. The damage had been done. No amount of regret or sorrow could change the past. She had to live with consequences, knowing that she would never have the chance to undo the harms had caused. And as much as she longed for a way to tell the truth, she knew she could never bring herself to expose the lie, to reveal the depth of the betrayal that had torn everything apart. Willow's soul was fractured, forever scarred by the choices she had made, and she was left to carry the unbearable weight of her regret for the rest of her life. What a whirlwind of emotion, betrayal, and bombshell revelations. Monday's episode promises to change the lives of Port Charles residents forever. Will Michael recover from Sasha's revelation? Will Nina's secrets destroy her credibility? And is this really the end for Curtis and Portia? One thing's for sure, General Hospital is just getting started. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to GH Updates for your daily dose of drama. We'll be right here, bringing you every twist, every turn, and every unforgettable moment. Until next time, stay tuned, Port Charles fans.